What's up, Nick?
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, man.
Um, I assume okay, so I'm a panelist, it looks like. You're the host.
Okay. Oh, cool. It has a live links to click live on Twitch and YouTube. That's kind of cool. So you can do live stuff straight from Zoom.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we should just like be at least broadcasting this to YouTube or something.
That would
Hey,
be, yeah, really cool.
I assume since I'm gonna be like co-host, I'm gonna need my video on. I cannot do that. Can you do that from your side?
Like turn on your video?
Yeah. Is that possible?
Let's find that's weird. Um, change panelist appearance.
Because you
Hmm,
cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
What? Really? Hold on here. Um, show participants. Invite copy link, video. Video settings? No, that's just my personal video settings. Um, yeah, right click your info. I can make you a host, but does not give me I can change your appearance. It's weird. But does not give me the ability, it looks like, to
All right, here we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Andrews. I'm a member of the Tailscale marketing team. I promise I will not be talking for very much during today's webinar. I want to introduce you to my colleague, Alan. He is a solutions engineer here at Tailscale. He's going to walk us through what is new with Tailscale. So, Alan, that very quick intro. What is new with Tailscale?
Sounds good. Thank you, Nick. And thank you, everyone, for hopping on today's webinar. So wherever you're dialing in from, whether US, Asia, or Europe, we appreciate it. And we're thankful for your interest into Tailscale. So we're going to take the next, 30, 40 minutes, give or take, and talk about what's new at Tailscale because there's a lot of new things, but I've highlighted a couple of those options here, and we're going to kind of walk through it a little bit and kind of figure out saying, oh, this is cool. Some of you may be familiar with some of these features. Some of you might not be, but wanted to take that time just to kind of run it through everybody. And as we kind of talk, we're going to have, hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A here at the end. We'll do our best. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop those into the Q&A chat and we'll try to get those out to you as well. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about 3 features, and Tailscale has a ton of features, but we got 3 of them that we're going to highlight, concentrate today. One's called App Connectors. It's in beta, and I put there all plans because we have a variety of different plans with Tailscale that you can leverage. So if you're on a premium or starter or free plan, you can play with actually all these features today. We have device posture, and what is device posture? What's it used for? And then grants, which might be some folks might be like, oh, what is that? Something new, something I'm actually super excited about because it takes what we're doing here with Tailscale and expanding upon it. So, but let's talk a little bit. For some of you may be familiar with Tailscale. For some of you, this might be your first exposure to what Tailscale is. So I'm just going to have a really quick definition. What is Tailscale? What do we make? Tailscale is a programmable networking software that is private and secure by default. And that's it in a nutshell. It's built on WireGuard. WireGuard is a very popular modern encrypted VPN tunnel. And Tailscale, we've taken that and we use WireGuard underneath it all, but yet we have added features, quality of life, and enhancements. And those are some of the features we're going to talk about today. And some of the differentiators out there. So some folks might be like, well, I'm using OpenVPN, or I'm using WireGuard natively, or another tool that's out in the marketplace. And so a couple that we feel are game-changing differentiators in Tailscale in comparison is really encryption for everyone. Point-to-point connections are encrypted with WireGuard. So we do not see your traffic. In fact, your traffic, even in your tunnels, it's all fully encrypted. We're identity oriented. So we don't store your username and passwords. We're not an identity provider. In fact, when you log into Tailscale or try it out today, hopefully, and are brand new, you'll notice we ask you to sign in with an SSO provider. That could be Google, it could be Okta, it could be Jump Cloud, Entra, or Microsoft AD. So you tie that into that user's identity with organizations and tools that do it really well, and even to the point where you have MFA that's enforced by leveraging a tool like Okta. So you've got that multi-factor authentication piece there. Another differentiator is our ACLs, role-based access control policies and ACLs, where when someone comes online or they're signing in, their access to resources is granted and managed by an ACL list. And one of my favorite pieces here is the easy to set up and manage. As we say there, 5 minutes, really. It's that simple. So if you've never tried it, you're like, oh man, this is going to be complicated. Just give it a whirl. Go to the App Store, go to Tailscale. We'll have some links here at the end, and you'll find out how easy it is to get set up and get going today. It also works wherever you do. So if you're working from home, like I'm here in the East Coast United States, working from my house, but yesterday I was in a coffee shop and working from there. No matter where you're at, once you're signed in and connected, the transition and Tailscale, your Tailnet, your network is going to stay connected across the whole board, which is a nice, pretty amazing feature there. We're infrastructure agnostic. And what we mean by that is you can connect anything to anything, no matter the operating system, hardware type, or configuration. Multi-cloud, on-prem, Raspberry Pis, Apple TV, Android devices, you pretty much name it, that you can connect a lot of different pieces here with Tailscale. And another amazing thing is we fix problems at layer 3. So for those that are familiar with the OSI networking model, layer 3, that networking layer where everything we do, we're over a network, right? The internet, Wi-Fi, all this layer 3 stuff that can get really complex, especially if you're setting up stuff in AWS and GCP or Oracle or Jump Cloud, and you're trying to connect to it. You've got all these IP addresses, networking rules, and all this stuff to manage. Whereas Tailscale comes in and simplifies a lot of that by, aggregating it, securing it, and just taking a lot of that headache out of the equation. So those are just a few, and so let's continue on. I'll talk quickly here, beta definition. So those 3 features that I showed, the app connectors, the device posture, and grants, they are considered in beta, and this is actually taken right off our documentation. And you'll see here, I'll just summarize it, that it's publicly available, so anyone can test it. You can just go out there, follow our docs, and we want you to test it. We want you to start, playing around and giving us feedback on how these features are working and, what, improvements could possibly be made. We do our best to document all the steps that's involved. So a lot of times documentation will be updated over the course of a beta release. And then a caveat also here is that there's no technical support obligations. We have an amazing technical support team here and some of my favorite people that work here, and they support our customers all over the world. But from a beta piece there's not necessarily, a support. You can open up a ticket, but there's no guarantee that there's an obligation from that piece there. So just be known from a beta definition of what that might look like. All right, so let's jump right in and talk about the first feature, what's new with Tailscale. We call it our app connectors, and it's in beta. Excuse me there. And what is it? So control device and user access to third-party applications without having to configure anything. As I put it also here, it's like an exit node for fully qualified domain name applications. So you're like, okay, so what does that look like in my use case? Well, the couple here, Mongo Atlas, and I got a screenshot here, and we'll show a quick demo of what that might look like. Salesforce, GitHub. Today's world where everyone's working with software that is all over the world. And you're trying to figure out, how do we manage access to these software applications, these SaaS applications? And app connectors is a way to do that. So as an example, what it might look like is in this piece here, which this is taken actually from our blog article linked on that last slide that shows how this works. Let's say we have a version control system, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, somewhere cloud hosted. Maybe a ticketing system like Zendesk or another tool out there. CI/CD systems that are available on the cloud, database as a service. So you've got these tools that are cloud hosted, and typically you sign in with your user credentials, your MFA, and anyone can get to it. A lot of these tools allow you to tighten down that access to it. So instead of just saying, hey, anybody can sign in, where hackers or bad actors are going to try to say, oh, I know this company uses this tool, so I'm going to try to brute force username passwords to get in. You can lock these applications down with whitelisted IP addresses. And a lot of organizations do that with all their employees' personal IP addresses. So they're like, hey, I just moved, here's my home IP address, so put that in the white list and voila, I can now access this app. But what happens is people move, people change jobs or the locations. But what if my home IP address was whitelisted, but the coffee shop IP address, because I don't know what it might be, is not whitelisted? Well, from home, I can get to the application. From the coffee shop, I cannot. So we solved that by using the application connector. In essence, where you have, as this example shows, a group in engineering that they have access to CI/CD, databases, ticketing. Well, group all, so engineering's part of the all employees group, they get access to the CMS, content management system, maybe the CRM, maybe the company wiki. But yet you're keeping third parties locked out of these resources. So how do we do this with the app connectors? So in this case, on this slide, showing illustration here, we've got your client that has Tailscale running on it, needs to get to the SaaS application here in the bottom. So they're going to make a query, go to, I'll just say, for example, Mongo Atlas, because that's the demo I'm going to show here in a few minutes. It goes out there, the authoritative name server comes back with the route saying this is where you need to go, because it translates those domain names to routes and IP addresses. Well, Tailscale App Connector intercepts that, takes it and proxies that information so that the traffic relays through the app connector into that SaaS application. So in that SaaS application, all you have to do is advertise the endpoint IP addresses of the app connector. So you've got one fixed IP that you have set up, and you don't have to worry about all your employees with multiple IP addresses trying to access all this information. So one example, working with a customer last year, they were trying to do some database stuff. They log into the panel and they had like 10, 15 different IP addresses in there. In fact, one of the guys was like, oh yeah, that's my old IP. I haven't had that IP in months. So their app still had an old IP address that was allowing whitelist traffic. And yes, the chances of access to that is probably fairly low. But just the fact that it had an IP address that it was allowing connectivity to, but it didn't belong to that engineer, so someone else could have it, leaves potential openings in your network or these applications where threat actors, bad actors can access them. So that's kind of some of the idea behind the app connector. One of the cool things with the app connectors is the ability to have high availability and regional routing. So as illustrated in this example here, we have traffic in Europe, US East, US West, all trying to get to this application connector. So if I'm in Europe and my app is, and my connector is in US West, you're routing that tailscale traffic all the way across the Atlantic to US West and then back to the app connector. And so what's going to happen is you're going to get performance issues because now we have this huge latency just because physics and thousands of kilometers and miles and ocean and distance across. So you can actually set up app connectors with regional routing and high availability that will say, hey, Alan's coming from the south of the US. The closest app connector based on latency, in our blog explains a little bit more how we calculate that using our DERP relays. We're going to connect to the US East connector and then let him access that SaaS application. So that makes it a little bit easier, makes it better and smoother for those clients coming across. And for organizations that depend heavily on third-party SaaS applications, this is a critical piece there. That way, as traffic comes across, you're not having downtime when something goes offline or anything that might happen in that realm. So let's go take a look at it real quick here and show what it looks like in action. Oh, here we go. So what I've got right here is my demo Tailnet, and I've got an application I'm going to access here on MongoDB. So I've got a Mongo database application that I'm going to have access to. And so I'm going to connect into it using the app connector. I'll run my commands here, enter my password. And what's going to happen here in a minute, because I'm currently not on the correct Tailnet, it will actually error out and time out because I'm actually connected to a different Tailnet, my corporate Tailnet. So in this event, it will not actually go through or connect because it's sitting here waiting. So instead of waiting for it to time out, I'm just going to go ahead and kill it and end it. You can see the error message earlier where it was like, hey, this only allows access from certain connectivity, certain tailnets. So let's go ahead and switch over to my tailnet that I have my app connector connected to. And we're going to try the same connection string here. So I'm going to connect to it, put in my password. Oh, helps if I have the right password here. Hold on here. And of course, when you do something outside of a demo, it works fine. But then all of a sudden you do something in a demo and then something messes up. Let's try that. There we go. All right. So now I'm in my Mongo collection here. I can see my databases. I can do Mongo database querying, all because I'm connected routing through my application connector here that sees my traffic coming through. And we can even verify this when I look at my Mongo Atlas connector. I see my egress IP addresses that I have set up here. And when I look at my Mongo database instance, I've allowed connectivity only from some of these IP addresses. In this case, I have a 70.148 and a 142.27. And when I look at here, 70.148, 142.27. And we have a brand new instance here that just showed up, and it's part of that round robin pool, even though I haven't added that into the Mongo system there. So that's how the app connector works there, and you can traffic public SaaS apps. We do some testing here, so like IP info, routing that through your application connectors, and you can see the status of what that might look like. On the backend piece here, when you look at your device itself, you can see that the routes come through because that app connector, in essence, is routing through it, and we can see all the routes that it discovers for the end SaaS app that you need to get to. In this case, because I am routing Salesforce, GitHub, Mongo, and ipinfo.io, I've got 60 plus routes that are tied into this specific app connector. And this is app connector East. And even as a end user here, I'm not saying, oh, use east or use west. It's based on the latency of my geographic location and where I'm at in order to, push that content across. So that's app connectors and how it works. And you can get set up with it right now, again, because it's in beta. So it's easily, able to get that up and running immediately. All right, so let's continue on and look at device posture. And I see a few questions coming in, so this is awesome. I will save those toward the end here. So please keep answering those, and I will get to them here once we're done. So thank you for that feedback for sure. So device posture, what is device posture? And super excited about, again, this feature just elevates and increases that zero trust and that security posture that an organization might have, right? Device posture, we want to see how secure, trustworthy something is. Whether you can collect device attributes, you can use ACLs to limit access for devices that do not meet these requirements. So there's a link to the blog article that talks about device posture. And then we have some documentation that showcases, how to get it set up, and then even specific CrowdStrike, because CrowdStrike is one of our first, really native integrations with CrowdStrike Falcon that we have tied into this. So as example use cases, right? You can use something like a minimum Tailscale version. We want to make sure everyone's using, latest and greatest because of bug fixes or security issues. We want to make sure devices are up to speed. Maybe the latest antivirus software that's installed. If you have like a Jamf or Intune or an MDM type of solution, you can integrate with a CrowdStrike. So finding out, you get a score. How trustworthy is this device based on these CrowdStrike scores that we might have? And then you can even use it with something like app connectors for continuous verification, right? So we have an app connector set up to manage access to our SaaS app. We're using device posture to help continuously verify that that user and device is legit. So what does that look like? So a couple pitches here as we kind of show, and then we'll jump right in back into our Tailnet and kind of show you when a device is opted in, what it looks like. You would go in your settings, set that up. You get the identity collection where you can get serial numbers and different posture information about your devices connecting to CrowdStrike Falcon, integration is native and right there. Then you can use posture conditions in your ACLs to help manage things as well. So it would look, this slide here just shows attributes that Tailscale can see based on, what that device is running. This was off my laptop the other day, so I'm running 14.2.1. I'm running a beta version of Tailscale, so it's in the unstable track. And then in ACLs, what does that look like? Well, we have defined a couple posture rules saying, hey, this user needs to have the latest Mac, the latest iOS, latest Android. But what consists of the latest Mac? Well, when I look at my postures in my ACL, in this case, as a sample here, our Mac OS is anything that's greater than equal to 14. And Tailscale release track is stable or unstable greater than 1.4. So if I actually edited this and removed the unstable piece there, my device would not be able to connect to our Tailnet, because as we see here that I'm actually running the release track of unstable. So there's something, and it has to be version 1.4 or greater. Same thing with iOS, whatever version, latest Android, Windows, etc. So when you look at this from an organization standpoint, where you're remote employees and you want to make sure everyone, because sometimes remote employees aren't the best at updating their security on their devices. Hey, you need to restart Chrome because you're running 5 versions behind, but I got too many tabs, so I don't want to hit that restart button. Something like device posture, you integrate that, and now that user cannot get onto your Tailnet and your network until they've done all the minimum work to make sure they're up and running with everything. So let's take a look at that again, similar to the other one. We'll take a look of what device posture might look like. So when I showed you there my device earlier from my screenshot, I didn't have anything connected to it, but now we can see that here's my serial number. So if I'm using, serial management with MDM device management tools, we want to verify that, hey, the serial number is legit, or different posture tracks here. We can see the attributes that we have set up for this device itself. And when I go into my access controls here, we can see the posture settings that we have set up here. Right here is posture. In this case, here's my ACL group I use for testing. I've got Mac, iOS, Android, Linux, SSH console applied to my user. So when I log in as Alan at TS Just Works, it's going to verify that I adhere to these different postures that have been set up. And you can see here where we have them all defined right here, different versions and, console, JavaScript, etc. So as an org, you can set these up. Our guides walk you through different ways of accessing and getting this up and running. From a device management, looking at that screen, so here's that device integration posture. So we can see that one of 20 devices opted in. So that was my laptop. That's why the serial number, we can see, hey, let's inspect that serial number. Well, this is that device that connected to that. Some devices do not have posture collection enabled. Some must reconnect, and 3 must upgrade to version 1.52. And then if we had CrowdStrike Falcon, it's just a matter of tying into, my API, client ID, client secret to enable to connect into CrowdStrike itself. So we're excited about this, and the ACLs here, that this will continue to grow and mature as we get feedback, different users. We're kicking off with CrowdStrike, but there's other tools and things out there that we're excited to be adding as part of this as well. All righty. Let's go on to ACL grants. And this is something that might be a little bit like, how does this apply? What can I use? What can I do with this? And can make things, a little bit trickier. So grants extend your ability to manage access controls from the networking layer to the application layer. So I mentioned way earlier in that one slide that we operate on layer 3 in the OSI model, the networking layer. The application layer, for all you network geeks out there, right? So layer 7 is your application layer. When I'm using Chrome and I'm accessing Google or YouTube, that's all handled on the application layer. Right now with Tailscale, if you were to grant access to an application in your Tailnet on port 80, everybody that has access to that rule set. So let's say I have 3 applications running on an internal web server, maybe a dashboard, maybe a web-based database viewer, and maybe a help desk ticketing system. And I'm running it behind Nginx or something like that, where I can proxy multiple apps over the same port internally and using headers to determine which app will be served on that port. So right now on the layer 3 aspect of it, we say users can access anything here on port 80. Well, they can access all 3 of these applications, but maybe you don't want all your users accessing the help desk ticketing system. Maybe you only want the help desk team to access that, or the engineering team has access to the database web interface. And it's a little bit challenging to do that from a networking layer 3 piece here, because we're just saying, hey, engineering has access to this device on port 80. And so, that's it. That's all networking cares about, right? The TCP, UDP, the port, protocol, whatever else. Well, with ACL grants, you can now take that a step further and move that to the application layer. So it extends, as we mentioned here, right? It extends that access control into the app layer. So now you can have a group called prod that has access to destination tagged, in this case, Go links, as my example showing here, right? So a user can access these maybe short links or whatever that might be. And whether it's application-based permissions, Kubernetes permissions, because we see a lot of Kubernetes users out there doing Kubernetes-related work, by moving to grants that enable you to tighten things down and be a little bit more granular. So now we can use that Tailscale identity piece there and those ACL grants and leverage it into something like application beast there. So as an example, I keep going the wrong way. If I go to Go webinar, in this case, it's going to fail. Well, oh, I'm on the wrong tailnet. That's why. So let's switch back to my corporate tailnet here. And then it will now work. If I am in the correct group and I have access to this, when I hit Go webinar, it's going to reroute me to that application based on my user rights and privileges. And I linked it really to our goal. This is actually an open source project, so we use this internally for a lot of our shortcuts to different apps. And I just created one for the webinar today that actually goes out here to our public GitHub repo on the private short link. So you can pull this down and get it up and running today. But because our corporate talent is using these ACL grants, and in this case, everyone has, we're in group prod. And so we have access to this app that is tagged Go Links. If I was not in group prod or along that line, it would have failed and I would not be able to gain access to that. All righty, so that was 3 of our features in a really quick time frame here. I wanted to put a couple links out here of how to get started. So if you've never touched Tailscale before, brand new, interested in it, you can go to tailscale.com, click that Get Started button in the top right corner, sign in with your GitHub, Google corporate account, and immediately start, 5 minutes or less, like we said there, get it up and running. If you're interested in our changelog, because we're rapidly iterating and coming out with new features, there's a link to our changelog. For those of you that are really curious, like, how does Tailscale work? What is this? First time I've heard of it, heard some buzz about it. We have a great blog by one of our founders on how it works and the picture of traditional remote access to today's mesh-based remote access with better tools. Then the link to that Go Links. And I'm a huge fan of open source. I love open source. And one of the exciting things we do here at Tailscale is it's an open source project. So you can actually go out and see the code that's being built. You can look at WireGuard because, we contribute back to the WireGuard. You can see what we're building out there. You can see some, put in public issues and along that line. Follow us, please, on social medias. YouTube, we have a great DevRel team. We got a great YouTube channel, Twitter as well, or X. And even for those of you that are Redditors, we have a fairly active Reddit community with Tailscale as well. So any questions, drop it in there. Really friendly community members to give some help there. So now, all that said and done, we got some questions. So we got about 10 minutes here. So I'm going to kind of go through some of these questions here and answer them as we go. So first one, we had someone emailed in earlier. Question is asking about setting up different devices with multiple names and how that would work with Tailscale. Well, Tailscale, when devices come up with multiple names, it starts appending a -1, -2, -3. So if you have an automation where all your devices might have the same name, when they come in, they'll get their own unique IP address. And then Tailscale will basically set a -1, -2, -3. So you'll be able to see them in the administrative console of what all those, to prevent that name collision along the board. But you can also use tools like our device posture, collect that serial number. So if they're unique devices, you can use that serial number collection piece there, tie to a device posture, and do some more, control based on serial number or things along that line or access to that. And you can also rename devices in your admin console as well. So Another question that came in is someone has a custom domain and want to add Tailscale IP addresses, how that might work to make sure that IPs stay the same. Well, you can use your public DNS records. You can set an A record to that Tailscale IP address, that 100.xyz. The device IP will not change or should not change. Now, you can manually change a device IP, but by default, it's not going to change. So you could set an A record to reference that as well within your DNS. And then if you want to, for having certificates, you can use Tailscale Cert, which gives you the ability to issue Let's Encrypt based certificates for some of your services within there. And then another question was about best practice for serving server on the telnet is by using tags, not necessarily using users ownership or passkeys, but use ACL tags. As you saw in my app connector, we had things tagged, and those become owned by the telnet itself there. So those are a couple questions that came in. Another question here, someone has an issue exposing a service with the Kubernetes Tailscale operator is used. Since we did not talk about Kubernetes here today, that is something in the future. We're looking to have a webinar probably around our Kubernetes operator. It's in beta as well, but they just released some newer features on it and everything. So if you got an exposure service, check our documentation. It's being constantly updated, and I believe there are some specific steps that walk you through of how to expose a service with that operator. If you're a customer, and you can also, put in a ticket or even ask on the subreddit as well, and someone can possibly get back with you on that there. Another question here from Jason asking about app connectors. That is what you're looking for. That's awesome. Yes, you're right. So you've got a dynamic system connecting to on-premise. You're doing port forwarding, public IP whitelisting. Yeah, so there you go. So we don't really care your question about that specific SaaS ERP app connector support. We don't really care what that back-end app is. If that back-end app has the ability to put in a public IP whitelist, then you can leverage Tailscale to manage access to it. So for example, let's go back here to the app. Let's say I want this app connector, or I'll do this one right here, IP info. I want to add this ERP to it. You're going to have your own egress IPs, and those would be the ones that you would whitelist with the Microsoft. But again, test it out. Follow our app connector directions on that. If you run into any issues, let us know through a support ticket or in a follow-up email or something like that. More than happy to kind of work through if there's some weird networking or whatever going on. But I think what you talk about, cloud ERP connecting to kind of on-premises type stuff without having to have public IPs whitelisted, this is a perfect solution for something along that line. Let me see here. Another question we have here is, again, about app connectors, maintained by the SaaS images, Mongo, or is it something we admins need to deploy in our telnet on a machine somewhere? So like everything with Tailscale, this is something you would need to deploy within your infrastructure. So we do not provide public app routers or servers. So when you look at my demo telnet here, we use infrastructure as code. We use Terraform and Pulumi and other tools to deploy these. These are probably EC2 instances on AWS. And so the nice thing about this is you control all of this. We don't as Tailscale. So if there's a networking issue, our control plane has a hiccup, there's not going to be any downtime because this lives within your own telnet. So that is service. Now, the high availability, the regional routing still depends on your devices. So if you have multiple connectors and you want to set up HA regional routing, it leverages Tailscale information with our DERP relays to find latency to set that up. And some of it requires like, hey, support, I want to set up a regional routing with this, and our team can help configure some flags on the back end for that as well. Thank you for that question, Robin. Hopefully that answers your question there. Another question here. Someone asked about device posture. Looks interesting. Combinations with an MDM solution, act as minimal reporting tool for small shops. Is there a way I can utilize Tailscale not to see how the network health is, but could we even add custom posture stuff, or is it always just a set of predefined attributes? So right now we have a couple limited attributes set up with device posture. We are working to add more support for custom attributes and other things down the road. So again, check the change log, check the documentation, and you can kind of see how that would go. But you're right, for small shops, being able to see the health of a machine that is device posture and MDM is something that we're seeing a lot of excitement about that. Another question, add-on question. I see Tailscale in the Azure Marketplace. Yes, however, I do not see it on the Microsoft App Source where our ERP extensions live separate store. Okay, that's awesome. So we have a partnerships team. We just got our stuff on the Azure Marketplace refresh, so we're super excited about that. I will take this question back. This is awesome, and I will check with our partnerships team to kind of find out, hey, do we need to have something to App Source Store? How does that play in? I don't foresee it being it because we're not installing something within your ERP itself. You could set it up outside your ERP and tie into it. But thank you for that link, and we'll try to get that over and see if we can find an answer, Jason. The Go Links admin console or docs, is that enabled by default? So no, the Go Links is something that is a open source. So here it is, Robin. If you go to github.com/tailscale/golink, and you can actually pull down the repository for the Go Links and everything there for you there. So no, it's not something set up. It's something that what's awesome is our team, as we've built tools, right? We've dog fooded a lot of our stuff like, hey, we need to have this. So we build it, we use it internally, then we're like, this is awesome. So we throw it out there in GitHub and let others use it as well. Just ways to give back just makes using Tailscale better for sure. And another question here, question regarding auth keys for SSH. We are not sure where or what time we might run an automation script to get the Raspberry Pi online. Is there a way to increase 90 days, 100, 365 days, or is there any other way to onboard Pis to Tailscale? Yes, that is using our OAuth client. So if you go in our document, if you go under settings, click on OAuth clients, this is where you can generate more of a longer term API or way to generate an auth key to add devices to your telnet, that it will generate a short-lived key token temporarily to get that auth key. Because if you're doing it through a key right here, through this, these will have an expiration date, but you can use the OAuth client to increase that or automate it a little bit better along that line. Hopefully that answered your question there. All right, I'm looking at our time. I know we're running here at the end, and hopefully that answered all your questions. I know that was a lot of content in a short amount of time. Again, thank you for attending today's webinar on some new features. And stay tuned. If you have any other questions, please reach out to us. We're glad you're here. And that's all I got. And have a wonderful day.